Okay, so happy, what is it? Yeah, tomorrow's Halloween, right? So what is it? A mischief night, All Hallows Eve. There's like, I don't know, what cabbage night, depending on where you're from. But for us, it's the night before Halloween when we're going to be flooded, typically flooded with candy left and right. Who here, tell me in the chat if you're in a similar situation where you feel like Halloween kicks off what I'm going to call sweet season. Because I've been doing this for, oh my God, it's almost like a decade now. And when I tell you every year from Halloween to New Year's, this is the season that it's like treat season. Yeah, so many treats. You see, Amanda said in the chat, so many treats where it's like Halloween. Then you have, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, then you have December's holidays and all of that, and all of the parties, the get togethers, the gifts, the sweets in the office, all of that. It kind of kicks into high gear at this time of year. Anybody else? Discounted candy. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And I'm not just saying that, like, the candy we got for people too, like it's had a dent put in, So let's see. Yes, but I just Amazon some candy to get here because I'm behind. Oof. I know Walmart, at least ours, had like a ton still. Even past New Year's in New Orleans, we keep going with Mardi Gras, with king cake. What's king cake? I want that. That sounds really good. Tell me what that is so I can make that gluten-free, low carb, because that sounds like something really fun. Nick says he thinks it's like a fruit cake. Oh, girl. I love it. I'm going to look it up and I'm going to make it. But anyway, this time of year kicks off, I think, not only do we have more sweet treats, but I also see an uptick every year in binge patterns around this time. I see this from my clients who are quote unquote doing really well, where they're like on the ball and they've been on autopilot for a while. I see this with my KGG clients, those of you who have been with me for a really long time, let's say, not even just my newbies. And then see it with people who feel like they're having a harder time adopting their baby steps. Across the board, I see an uptick in binging. So I think it's important, I usually do, those of you who have been with me for a while now, you might remember this, but I usually do some kind of like a challenge or a boot camp or some kind of thing. I don't know what I want to call it this year, so I don't intimidate anyone. I usually do one around the holidays, like December-ish, leading up to New Year. Or I'll do one right after New Year, but I want to do one specifically for half of November. And the reason is I want to include ways to make hormone-friendly holiday favorites. My goal is in the challenge that's coming up with you guys, I'll explain how I'm going to run it, but my goal is to make it so that we work on, if you remember, kitchen confidence. That's a big part of my program. I want to go over not just the food, the way you cook it, scheduling it in, making it fit in your busy day-to-day life when you don't really have a lot of energy. Like, those are the things that I feel like hold us back. In this day and age, we're bombarded with what we should be doing, or anyone can Google a recipe, right? But I think when it comes to, and tell me if I'm wrong, when it comes to the accountability of having some kind of a group challenge where it's for X amount of time, you're talking with other people who are like-minded, I think that kind of builds momentum, like a different momentum, a different focus. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be doing that from November 11th. I'm going to post about it in the page in more depth. November 11th until November 28th. So the day after, November 29th, the day after Thanksgiving, Black Friday. So we're going to go from the 11th to the 29th of November. I'm going to run it through a WhatsApp group separately. So it's just the people who want to be in that group, right? It's not going to be like blowing up the general chat. And we're going to do a daily mindset focus. I don't know if any of you guys remember that from my past challenges. We're going to do a daily mindset focus where I'll send that in there. We're going to do a weekly recipe together that's holiday based that I'll be doing with you. I'm actually going to make it so I can provide you photos and a tutorial and stuff like that. We're going to do a once a week kind of meetup in there just to kind of chat, see where we're all at, bring what we're going through to the table, and really, like, I want to see this be kind of a tight-knit challenge. Doesn't mean it's going to require a lot of your time. It's just going to require you checking in weekly and checking out the recipe that I post in there. All right. So I'm going to be posting the link to the WhatsApp group for that. I'll probably put it up the beginning of November or a couple days. So keep an eye out for that. Okay. But in the meantime, that's the separate challenge, which I'm really freaking pumped about. I don't know about you guys, but now we're facing Halloween season. Let's shift gears back to the present. What are you guys feeling going into a day dedicated to sugar, essentially? A day dedicated to sugar, if you have kids getting dragged around and run ragged. What are your thoughts and feelings going into Halloween? How are you feeling about that? Tell me in the chat. Babe, could you pass me a water? I don't know where the hell. Oh, it's over there. Thanks. Halloween is the least of my worries. Well, that's good. Well, how about in terms of sugar? Whether it's Halloween or more so the sugar aspect of it. Yeah, it can for sure be, it turns into one fun size M&Ms, down the hill we go. Not even appealing to me. That's awesome. Honestly, what's weird is when I don't know, side note, but for me, like I don't really eat a lot of sugar. It's just how I've become accustomed over the years. And I'm also, to be honest, like I used to have crazy, crazy cravings, and now I'm much more of a savory person. But I'm eating these candies and I'm like, I can't taste anything besides sugar in them. Does anyone feel like our candy has gotten progressively sweeter over the years? This couldn't be the same kind of sweet that we had as kids. Like it feels like there's not even like a chocolate flavor to them anymore. If you're having chocolate, it just tastes like sugar, you know? So there's that. If it was oh yeah, Nick is like, it's probably cheaper to make 100%. I feel like if we were giving out European candy, it would be a wrap, you know? That would be down my gullet ASAP. More so the bags of goldfish screaming at me to eat. You guys are giving out goldfish? That's awesome. I almost bought like a big pack of Gushers at Costco to give out. So I was like, I'm gonna do something different. We went with the cheap chocolate, but you know, oh well. Okay, so let's get into it. Why is sugar bad? Right? And the key to that is that it's not. Sugar is not bad. Sugar is not going to kill anybody. I mean, I'm a type 1 diabetic and I'm out here telling you sugar isn't going to kill anyone, right? If you're type 1 like me, you take insulin for it. If you're not, your body's supposed to release insulin for it. So it's not bad. I want us to take away the label of good or bad. And I get some pushback when I say that because people are like, well, you know, don't make excuses for unhealthy food. But here's the thing. First of all, healthy and unhealthy is just something some bro made online. Like I I could get into a whole other talk on that. If you want to zoom on that, I'm happy to do it. But second of all, I would rather focus on what it's doing to your body and whether or not those are the things that you are comfortable with it happening. I would rather look at it from that lens than to look at it as bad. I think it's so oversimplified and childish to start to grade our food as like bad. I'm bad if I eat this. When it's just food, it's not bad or anything. It has certain effects on you. You know, you take something healthy, like, okay, you take almonds, someone who's allergic to nuts, that's going to be a bad food for them to eat because they're going to have a bad reaction to it, right? And it's the same thing with sugar when you have hormone imbalance or you have excess inflammation or anything like that, is that might be triggering to things in your body where the repercussions of that might not be favorable. It's not to say that it's like, oh, you're so. Does anyone see in Family Guy one of the things in Family Guy where he's like getting the sample cookies and he's like, oh, I'm so bad. Just one more, just one more. I'm so bad. I think of that every time with this. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, I will send you a YouTube link if you ask, if you text me and ask. But like, why are we treating it like oh my God, so naughty? You know, like it's just a bunch of chemical components. All food is, everything is basically chemical components that yields a certain kind of result when you consume it. That's all. Okay, so my hope in today's Zoom, I want everybody to keep that mindset that there's nothing bad about any food. It's just simply a series of data and choices and repercussions with how it interacts with your body. Okay, so let's get into it. Cravings. We're gonna talk about sugar cravings and why having candy or sugar or anything can kind of kick them off from two directions. One, from the insulin resistance standpoint, and then two, from the binge standpoint. Okay, and that's a little bit more emotional based, right? So we got the physical side of insulin resistance and hormone imbalance and stuff like that, and then we got more of the emotional side with candy being the quote unquote forbidden fruit, right? Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about insulin resistance. Who here watching has insulin resistance or thinks that they have insulin resistance? Tell me in the chat. Throw a 1 in the chat if you think that you have or you've been diagnosed with insulin resistance. Got a couple of 1s. Me, myself, and I as well, even though I'm a type 1 diabetic, which is super fun. I'm literally resistant to the thing I have to like inject or pump into myself to stay alive. But the idea behind insulin resistance, and even if you haven't been formally diagnosed with it, I think a lot more people have it than they realize if you have PCOS or Hashimoto's or any of these kinds of issues. We are at such higher risk for developing insulin resistance if you have PCOS and Hashimoto's. So I think it's important to keep an eye out for this no matter what, right? So what the hell is insulin resistance? Let's do a little refresher. We release insulin. It's a hormone made by our pancreas. We release insulin for two reasons. One, it regulates our overall blood sugars. So if you're too high, your body will release insulin to bring it back down to normal range, right? And then two, it turns the carbs that you eat into energy for your cells or something usable. And it prevents those sugars, because I'm going to get ahead of myself here. All sugar is carbs, all carbs is sugar, if that makes sense. Everything gets converted into sugar, some form of sugar at the end of the day. Whether you're eating candy, you're eating rice, you're eating apples, whatever the case may be. I don't even look at sugar on labels necessarily. I just look right at the carbs because it encompasses and includes sugar in it. So just keep that in mind. When you eat these carbs, which includes the candy, the sugar, blah, 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 your body releases X amount of insulin to convert those carbs so that it doesn't cause excess sugar in your blood. It turns it into something that is able to be utilized rather than excess sugar in your blood, which raises your blood sugars. Do you guys follow me so far? So we got reducing your blood sugars, keeping you in range if you're too high, converting your carbs and sugar so that it doesn't go into your blood and cause higher blood sugars. Okay, that's insulin's job. And keep in mind that insulin is technically an androgenic hormone. In simpler terms, a male hormone. So like testosterone is also a male hormone. And so if you have androgenic PCOS, where you have an excess of this testosterone, excess insulin can mimic the same symptoms. Keep that in mind. Okay, so insulin resistance is when that formula that your body is supposed to innately just know to give you like X amount of insulin for X amount of carbs, or X amount of insulin to drop your blood sugars X amount of points, that formula is off. So instead of being accurate and releasing just enough for what you need, it releases too much. Now, if insulin brings your blood sugars down and you release too much insulin, what happens to your blood sugars if you release too much insulin? Someone tell me in the chat. Releasing too much insulin. Insulin's job is to bring your blood sugars down. If you release too much, they tank. Exactly, Lisa, they tank. So when your blood sugars are low, your body recognizes this and it puts out the most intense craving you can have for sugar and for carbs. Why? To bring your blood to bring your blood sugars back up. So if you've ever experienced where you feel like absolute crap, and then next thing you know, you're like craving carbs or sugar, or it might not even be like something that good. It could be like juice or something like that. And you just feel really crappy. It could be a low blood sugar from having too much insulin. Okay. So here's the thing though. Your liver, if you're not a diabetic taking synthetic insulin, if you are just regulating yourself with your insulin or whatever, your liver is set to release excess sugar as a means to keep you alive. So when your blood sugar drops, it's like a fail safe. It's like if you can't have access to food, your liver kicks in with that extra sugar to bring you back up. But if you've already eaten something sweet or carby because you're craving it like hell, and then your liver kicks in with excess sugar, and we know carbs and sugar and stuff raises blood sugar, which makes your pancreas release more insulin. And we know if you have insulin resistance, you release too much insulin, it drops you back down too much again. So it becomes a cycle of dropping, like releasing too much insulin, dropping, craving sugar, eating sugar, releasing it from your liver, going back up, your body recognizing it, giving you more insulin, dropping back down, and repeating the process over and over again. Did I confuse the ever-loving shit out of anyone? If you put a 1 in the chat, if you feel me, if you understand, you're with me so far. Put a 2 if you're like, I need some clarification. Put a 1 if that makes sense. Put a 2 in the chat if you need some clarification. Cool. All right. It's the merry-go-round of blood sugars. Round and round we go. Now, if your body is releasing too much insulin in general, because that's what insulin resistance is, it's just overall that formula makes you release more insulin. When you eat something sweet or sugar or like carby on its own, let's say not because you're low, just because it's delicious, it's there, whatever. You eat it, your body, instead of releasing the exact amount of insulin needed for those carbs, here we go again. It's going to release too much insulin for those carbs. It's going to drop you too low. You're going to crave sugar. You're going to eat it. You're going to go high. You release too much insulin, back down again. So naturally, as you can see, Halloween, if for people who are really into candy and stuff like that, if it's not from a binge standpoint, right, it can be really triggering because let's say you don't typically eat sweets. A lot of you do, and I got a lot of questions on this, so we'll cover it, which is fine. Sweets are not, again, nothing bad. But let's just say that it could potentially be that, like, if you have a lot of candy on one day, you can see ramifications of that for the next week or so in the way of cravings. And this is why you might notice that it feels like the floodgates open. If you ever feel like, I'm so good, I keep it low carb, and then man, I give in, quote unquote, I'm air quoting if you're listening on Spotify, quote unquote, I give in, and then I'm just a bottomless pit. I crave sugar like crazy. This is literally why. It's not just because you're an asshole, it's because you got hormones and shit that's messing it up. Right? Very eloquent. So that's number 1. Insulin resistance, the way you want to, I'm going to get into some tips on how to work around all this. But I want to know, before we move on from this point, what are your thoughts on hearing this? It might be a review for some of you guys. This might be new information for some of you. But what are your thoughts before we move on in terms of what you've experienced with the extra insulin? I hope you can't hear my baby crying in the background. I put up a video about him being really chill, and he's been fussing ever since I hit post. So I hope that's not distracting. Tell me in the chat. Thoughts on insulin resistance and sugar cravings? Definitely have some. I would say talking to people sometimes, they might not even realize that they have. I think a lot of people know, like working with me, I'll ask you to get like a glucose monitor and test your blood sugars and stuff. But sometimes the first thing that prompts me to ask people to do that is how they get cravings. And another one is, do you feel exhausted after you eat sugar or carbs? If you eat sugar or carbs and you like feel like afterwards you need to lie down, or you feel like Medusa all of a sudden, you want to rip someone's head off out of nowhere, any of those kinds of feelings, a lot of times we'll think like, oh, am I reacting to a food? No, you're just probably having a low blood sugar because you release too much insulin. The exhaustion used to be so bad. And it's like a heavy exhaustion. Like I know that when you have thyroid issues and stuff, you can have fatigue, which might not necessarily be sleepy, but at least for me, I feel like insulin resistant sleepiness is or fatigue is like you gotta close your eyes. Like you can't even focus on someone speaking to you, you know, the worst. Let's see. 5 years ago, I started having these awful dizzy spells and couldn't figure out what was going on. I went to urgent care once for it, and they told me that I was having a panic attack. That's their favorite go-to, you know? Not to negate panic attacks from being very physical and awful and, debilitating as well, but it's not always a panic attack, like it could be something else. That definitely happens to me if I don't also have protein with the sugar and the carb. Yes. Good job. That's one of the points we're going to talk about. I used to get cravings more when I used to eat cereal a lot at night. Now that I don't anymore, I definitely notice a difference at that hour with not needing the cereal or craving it. Yeah, absolutely. I love that point. Those of you guys have been in the program with me for a while now, you're used to the idea that like how many times you come to me and be like, should I eat this? And I'll never say no, but I think realizing what it does to you and how it makes you feel on your own and working around it is so different than saying, I can't have that because I'm trying to lose weight or I'm on a diet. It has no merit. When it's like it makes me feel like crap and I would rather not, that's a whole different what's the word I'm looking for? Priority. Like that's a whole different, it's not the right word, but a whole different reason. I haven't had cereal in a year and I miss it, but it's nice not wanting sugar all the time or so often. Yeah, definitely. And there's some other alternatives, but it used to be like routine. Let's eat my evening cereal. I hear that all the time. Like that's like, I feel like cereal's a very big evening comfort food for sure. So, okay, that's the physical side of it, right? Then let's talk about the more emotional side of it, which is the binging side. And I think a lot of times I've talked to people who don't even really care for candy or sugar all that much, but on Halloween is when they'll eat it because it's around, it's mindless, but also because it's acceptable. It seems acceptable, especially if your kids have a ton of candy lying around and all that stuff. And I find that it can be triggering in a binge sense for a few reasons. One, it feels like I said, it's permitted on this one day. Two, or maybe it's like you don't want to waste it, so it's allowed, right? Two, it feels like, well, I guess this is the same one and the same, but you feel like you got to get it in while you can, right? And then I think three, it's like this feeling of guilt, like with all binges, that once you have one, it's like the floodgates open and it feels like you're just before you know it, you're just snacking. You want that taste again. You want that. And it's all fueled by the limited time that you're quote unquote allowed to have it. I think that or who has experienced that when it comes to binging? Maybe it's not Halloween specifically, but who feels like maybe closer to the holidays or whatever, that if something feels permissible for a certain period of time, feels acceptable, you notice that you don't even necessarily have quote unquote control over how much you have. It just feels like you're stocking up for the winter. Might not even be that you're like crying into a Ben and Jerry's, like that's not always, I call that the Hollywood binge. That's not the most common binging, right? A lot of times it's with just food that happens to be there, holiday stuff, kids stuff. It's mindless, right? It's self-soothing, or it's a celebration or a punishment, all of those things where it can be set off by something as simple as, well, it's Halloween. Let me take one of the peanut M&Ms out of my kid's container. So that being said, I'm going to give you guys some tips on how to work around this in general. Okay. You can use it for if it's Halloween, if the candy doesn't float your boat, whatever, use it in general. But I'm going to give you some tips that factor in both of these things. And the first one has to do with the binging. And that is allow yourself to have it. I know that sounds really weird. It's like, okay, what the hell program is this? Like, we're not supposed to have it. You tell me it's bad for my blood sugars, and then next thing you know, you're telling me to go ahead and have it. Because here's the thing, if it's sacred because you're never allowed to have it, and you got to get it in while you can, and it takes on a life of its own, and blah, blah, blah. If you allow yourself to have it, it loses its allure. When I'm working with someone who has this extreme fear of food, right? They feel like they're addicted to food, to sugar, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell them this and they'll be like, oh my God, I'll be like, eat whatever you want. And they'll be like, what? Like, how is that advice you're giving me as a coach? And I'm like, listen, if you were to completely let yourself go, let go of all any food rules, everything is allowed, understanding the consequences of how you might feel after, but everything is allowed. You would, let's say at the most extreme circumstance, you went and you posted up at Krispy Kreme. And let's say those first, at first, you're eating one after the other, because it's allowed. How long before you get sick of Krispy Kreme? How long before it's just like, I can have that any day I want? Like, okay, I'll go get one if I want. Because you're not just gonna continue to like, oh, engorge yourself on food. That's the fear. That's the diet fear telling us we better be disciplined. You better be good. Don't fall off track. Don't eat anything that goes against your baby steps ever, because then you're gonna not get back on track. That's just fear and disordered thinking, because it's not the actual truth. The truth is, when you have an open policy with food and it's just about data and choices, even if you do have a couple, you'll recover and move on, and it doesn't matter. I mean, how fragile are we if one fun-sized Twix is going to be the friggin' nail in the coffin? It's really not that bad. What happens is, if it becomes a open policy, like you just continue going because you want to get it in while you can. The other side of things becomes I ruined today already. Who's ever done this? You eat something that's quote unquote bad, quote unquote, I don't believe it's bad, but to you it's quote unquote bad, and then you're like, well, today's a free day, today's a cheat day, today I'll eat better tomorrow, I'm not gonna eat any of this stuff tomorrow. And it just, one thing becomes everything, because you've already lost the day. But the thing to remember is that digestion takes a couple hours, and then that food is on its way out the door, if you know what I mean. It's being turned into poop. There's nothing else you can do with it. It's not like it continues to cause ill effects. It is what it is. Your body did what it needs to do with it. So if you continue to compile and compound, I should say, more and more hormone unfriendly things throughout the day because you quote unquote were bad, you're actively choosing to add more to the pile, let's say. I use an analogy with this. I haven't used this one in a while, but it's like my favorite. And let's say you're pouring some milk in a cup, right? And you go and you spill some of that milk as you're pouring it. Do you look at that spill and go, I spilled some milk, I might as well dump the whole gallon out and pour the whole gallon of milk on top because you spilled some? That would be silly, wouldn't it? Why would you make a bigger mess for yourself? So that's the thing, I want you to remember is don't allow yourself the thing. If you really want those, whatever candy is there, whatever's there, allow yourself the thing and then move on. And you will see that the occurrence of you having the thing is going to reduce. You're not going to have it as much. You're probably not going to eat as much of it as you initially were afraid that you would if you let yourself. And then it stays to that one item and you move on with your life. Thoughts on this approach, the binge approach, where you let yourself friggin' have it. You are in control of your choices. You are in control of thinking the process through. No one is watching you, where you're only allowed today, and one thing you eat does not dictate the rest of the day. Thoughts, fears, questions, tell me. Removes the power from the food. Absolutely, Becca. Exactly. It just becomes something, some food to eat. It doesn't, I have hot glue all over my hands and it's driving me crazy. Making a baby's costume. Sorry if you see me looking down and picking at my skin. But yeah, no, absolutely. It removes the power from the food. It makes you feel in control. Nobody has to like walk on eggshells around their own food consumption. Even though we might be told that by people in our lives or society that it's like, oh, you're above a certain size, you better exercise control, you better have discipline. That's a bunch of horse shit. So that's number one, allow yourself, right? Number two, worth it questions. If you look on the page, on the Facebook page, it should be pinned to the top. Oldies but goodies. They're worth it questions there. And I want you to run through it whenever you're trying, because there are going to be moments. This is not, again, not just Halloween, this is all the time. But to think to yourself, you're going to have PCOS or Hashimoto's for the rest of your life. They're incurable. They'll have periods of remission, but they're ultimately incurable, right? So, that being said, are you to never have a piece of birthday cake ever again? You're never going to eat some pasta. You're never going to eat some rice, whatever it is that's your thing. What are you never going to have that? That goes back to number one. But number two is when you're trying to evaluate, am I just eating it because it's here and I don't really care for it? I don't really want it, but it's just here. You stop, take a few minutes and well, not even a few minutes. It's like quick. I think it's like 10 to 12 questions or whatever. And it's meant more for reflection, where you're looking at it and let's look at it together. I'm going to pull it up. Do. Come on. Oh my God, I have to delete things off this phone. It's so slow. This kid has taken over my phone with the amount of pictures that I take. Featured. Okay. So under featured at the top of the page, if you guys are looking along with me here, is this a special event that holds a sentimental place? Do you look forward to it? Is it something you rarely have access to? Why do you want it? Out of convenience, boredom, hunger, an event, a treat you enjoy? Like really, put the priority behind why you're eating it, Is there a substitute you wouldn't mind having? Will you feel regretful if you do not have it? That's the big one. Will it bother you all day if you don't? Is it worth feeling inflamed tomorrow? And it's okay if it is. Number 9, if you can have a small amount of it, can you have a small amount of it and be okay to stop easily? And number 10, did an emotional decision bring you to this? Stressful day, vigorous work day? Did something justify the food as a prize, punishment, pressure, failure? Then give you a few options there. And the reason that you're doing this is because I always tell people, if you're going to eat something, not again, no food is bad, but if you're going to eat something that makes you feel shitty or holds you back from getting the results that you want in your overall health and overall balance, you want it to at least be worth it, no? You don't want it to be like shitty, soggy bread on the table at some restaurant because it's in front of you, right? Like, it's not like you're eating this delicious focaccia that was flown in from friggin' Italy, or like, someone's grandma made it for you, like something with meaning, something with that's really worth it, versus a piece of white bread. Have it still if you really want it, but it's not even about answering these questions, about taking the few minutes to pause and powwow with yourself, to be like, where is my head at? To be more mindful about it, because if you do want to eat it, that's totally fine. You've accepted, you might feel puffy tomorrow, you might feel sluggish. Okay, fine. Like I said, there are going to be times that you're going to eat these things throughout your life, but you want to make sure that it's something you feel really good about eating. So taking a few moments there, that's number two. Taking a few moments there to really just sit with your mind, sit with your thoughts. Is it worth it, or is it just there? Like, what is it? Like in this bag of candy we have over here, it's like the 100 grand bars. There was a time where I would just eat it because it's there. And now I think about it, I'm like, I don't even like those. Like, who eats those? Sorry if you do. But I'm like, why do they even put those in the bag anymore? No one likes it. That gets left for last all the time. So sorry to the 100 grand. Is it 100 grand? Is that the name of whatever? The reject candy bar, or like dots. Who actually eats dots? I mean, my mom likes dots, and I always make fun of her for it because I'm like, what is candle wax? What are you eating? Anyway. Oh, where's my notes? I just had it. Where did it go? Hold on. Okay. I thought I deleted my entire note on this. Whew. So let's see. All these questions have been really helpful with navigating desserts at family gatherings. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot of times we eat things too to participate. That's one of I did a Zoom called, it was a while ago. I should probably remake it, but it's called binge triggers. And for me, I don't want to be the first one done eating, or I don't want to be the one not eating when everyone else is. It's just kind of like a participation thing, inclusion, So how many times I've thought about it at parties and stuff where I'm like, I don't even really want to eat this, I hate that. I think that's what makes us feel like we have no willpower when it comes to how much we do eat. Absolutely. It's this like, oh, you can't have that. Meanwhile, it like you look at on TikTok or on Instagram, people who do, what is it, the mukbangs, whatever they're called, where people eat on screen. The comments from the people that are thin doing these mukbangs where they're like eating this mass amount of food is very different than the same content that's made by people in a different body. And I think that's just built into us, right? That like people don't really warn a thin person like not to have too much. But if you're a certain size, don't trust yourself around those things, right? Like adds to this idea, this like labeling of ourselves as these gluttonous people that we're not. We're not that, you know? Or like when my mother-in-law is like, want dessert? And I'm like, I'm full. And then she will insist again. Yeah, oh yeah. I have learned to be like, no, I don't care if I offend you. Absolutely. My my immigrant parents make it a goal to stuff everybody. Like it's just a part of our culture, especially if you're entertaining. Like you have to engage in all the courses. And like my parents are okay with it because they know like my health and stuff, but like my extended family, my like aunts, uncles, that kind of thing, there's definitely been situations where I was like, I've said no, I said no, I said no, and then I'm like, I will literally shit myself if I keep eating. They're like, oh, like sorry, it looks delicious, you know? Um, Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Um, let's see. Why aren't you taking any food home? There's so much here. Take some. Oh my God, the worst, because I have a thing. I hate throwing food away. So I will leave that in my fridge to like go. I will find it sometime later, right? I'll look at it in my fridge. I do this with restaurants too. If I don't finish all my food, I have to take it home with me. And I still end up throwing it out, Anyway, So number two, worth it questions. Number three, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. I think Gabby mentioned it, but um, pair protein with a carb. Whenever you're eating your carbs, you pair a protein with it. And the reason being is it slows down digestion because your body has to, if you have something sweet, that's very easy for the stomach to break down. If you've ever known anyone who's had like gastric surgery of any kind, like weight loss surgery, if you notice, they'll say things like sweets go down easier, sugar is just so much easier. And it's not that it's like just some cop out. It's true. The body just digests sugary things really easy. What the problem with that is when things are digested quickly, you release the insulin for that item quickly. So you get this big burst of insulin. And if you're insulin resistant, you always want to avoid the quick, big burst of insulin. So if you pair a protein with it, protein takes a lot longer to digest and break down and things like that. So pairing that protein with it, it's going to kind of piggyback off of the carbs will piggyback off the protein, and then it'll slow down the release of the insulin as it's slowing down digestion. So pairing a protein with what you're eating, some rolled up cold cuts. That's one of my favorite just because it's easy and it's a lot of protein. Hummus, chickpeas in general are really good. Cheese, nuts. Edamame is a really good one, especially if you're into crunch. If you get the roasted edamame, that's like 22 grams of protein in a cup, and you can snack on it. It's not like who wants to eat meat when they're eating chocolate, but like edamame, crunchy edamame, they'll put that in a trail mix. So you want to pair protein with it. In the page, also in featured on the top is the protein cheat sheet. I hate saying it, cheat sheet. And I have a bunch on there. So if you need some inspiration of different types of protein that you can include, definitely check that out. So number one, we got allow yourself. Number two, we got worth it questions. Number three, pairing it with a protein. Number four, lastly, this is my favorite one. Plan to bring your own. I don't like the term substitutes. I feel like it just takes all the sexiness out of it. Who the hell wants to eat a substitute? Sounds like astronaut food. But there are so many delicious things that you can make or purchase pre-made that are lower sugar, lower carb, higher fiber, have protein in them, any of the above, right? There are so many others. I love, and this is going to be a big part of the challenge, the November challenge that I was talking about. I love making different variations of sweet stuff because I don't like to tell myself no. And that's one of my binge triggers, right? And also when I go to family's house, this was brought up before, what I'll do is I'll make enough for everybody, or like maybe not every single person, but like a bigger portion, like a serving platter full. And I'll bring it and I'll be like, look, I made something. And I'm not going to sit there and be like, it's sugar-free and it's gluten-free and it has the things that I can eat because I can't eat things. Don't make it weird. If it like things can still taste good and not contain things that are going to hurt your hormones. We're in the age of like wherever there's a market, there's a product. And right now, please, I was gluten-free. I started becoming gluten-free when I was 21. We had nothing. You had like one shitty cinder block roll of bread or a loaf of bread at like a health food store 20 minutes away. That was what we were working with. There are so many options out there now. And I really have fun making dishes, making desserts, making sides, stuff like that. I make it so that I can eat it all night. I just make a lot of it to be like, here you go. So I'm not sitting there with like my sad Tupperware of the food I can eat while everyone else has the rest. That will take a delicious food and make it feel shitty if it's just you sitting there eating this little thing. If you're like, look what I brought, and people are eating and they're like, this is good, if they ask what's in it, tell them what's in it, but you don't have to make it about it being diet or anything. And then I'll just put it by me and I'll just take scoops of what I want for the rest of the night. If I know I'm going to an event that's going to be very dessert heavy, I show up with the desserts for myself that I really like. Like I'll probably make like cupcakes or something, or Don't, I'm like gonna drool. I'm so hungry. I could smell my dinner as I'm having this talk. Donuts, or I'll make like a buffalo if it's like a big potluck kind of situation where there's a lot of more main courses or side dishes. I'll bring my own thing. I'll bring my own buffalo dip, or I'll bring my own meatballs or skewers, or different types of things. A radish potato salad, having fun, and this is, we're going to cover this more in depth in the challenge, having fun with the foods that taste good to you and don't hurt your hormones, make it a lot easier to look at that list of worth it questions and be like, it's not that special, and I could eat like a whole bowl of this other thing to my face and not have to think about it. Isn't that great? Like, you don't have to think like, oh, let me not have too much. How's this going to affect my blood sugars? Am I going to be able, do I have to unzip my pants as soon as I get to the car because I ate this and it was mediocre? You know, if your aunt's mac and cheese is mid, don't eat that. Bring your own, like, or bring a different variation or something. Make it better. Sorry, auntie, you know? So, thoughts on those things. Allow yourself, because you're going to have probably eat less than you thought you would, and you keep it to one thing instead of it snowballing and taking over your whole day. 2, worth it questions. Have a little meeting with yourself, little meeting of the mind, and just go through and be like, is this special or is this like shitty? Number 3, pair with a protein if you do have it, so that it doesn't have a big burst of insulin that comes with it that screws you up for days after the fact. And number 4, plan to make your own variation that you actually enjoy eating. If you need any help at all in those variations, I love brainstorming with people. You tell me what you got in your fridge. I did this on one of the Zooms where we played Chopped. Tell me what you got on hand. Tell me what you have at the grocery store, whatever. I'll help you make something fantastic. I love coming up with new recipes. I literally went to culinary school. So let me flex what I paid a lot of money and spent and paid back for years with student loans. Like, let me flex that muscle, I love doing it. So thoughts on these options? What stands out to you? Big takeaways. And then we'll finish with what to do if you do binge, and then a Q&A. What stands out to you about those 4 options? What seems feasible for you? Tell me in the chat. I feel like I gotta get like music on this thing or something. So when people are typing, it like plays some music. It's not just me sitting here like. Big takeaways from the 4 options. Are you gonna try any? I like the idea of bringing something because my family loves when someone makes a new dessert or food, and if they don't eat it, more for me. Amen. You know how many times I've been more excited because like I'll make a whole thing, I'll eat it all during the night, and then I'll have more to take home with me because I brought it in my container. So, I mean, if someone wants some, I'll, take it. But even if they don't like it, even better, honestly. And if it tastes good, it tastes good. What does it matter what's in it or what's not in it? Who else? Thoughts on these options? What do you see yourself using, especially this holiday season? I'm reading through, make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. As if apple pie only exists on holidays, right? I think that's also part of like the nostalgia too that we build behind it, where we're like, ooh, it's like it's cozy. It's like it's the holiday season, it's apple pie, it's like cinnamony, it's like spice, it has the spice to it, I just feel like it becomes like a nostalgia food that we associate with a certain time. Like we could have pumpkin spice lattes any time of year, but it ain't the same as when it's October, you know? Although I do have friends that drink it all year long, for sure. Okay, let's talk about what to do if you do binge. Let's say you feel like, you got all of these tools, you're thinking about it. Maybe you're not even a candy person. I have seen this happen before, so keep this in mind. If all of a sudden you look up and it's like, you got chocolate all over your face, you got 17 wrappers around you, and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? Let's just say, first of all, you're still not bad, right? Take a deep breath. And I want you to purposely and forcibly yell at the voice in your head that's trying to say anything mean to you. If you find yourself, and now this a lot of times has a lot to do with how you were regarded or how food was regarded growing up. So this might be a deeper trigger than you might realize. So let's say you realize you binged and all of a sudden you're like, why did I do this? I have no control. I can't believe it. This sucks. I might as well eat the rest of the day. Like I ruined today, blah, 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 blah. Maybe someone reacted like that when you quote unquote messed up when you were younger, and that's just like the mode that you go to. Whatever the reason for that mean voice, forcibly argue with it. No, it's just a piece of food. It's just some chocolate. It's just the this. It's just the that. It is what it is. This has nothing to do with the rest of my day. This has nothing to do with me as a person. Things are allowed to taste good. Things are allowed to be enjoyable to eat. I'm allowed to look at this as a lesson and move on from it. Gentle parent yourself a little bit, and just there's no need. The negativity isn't going to keep you from doing it again. If that was the case with how mean we are to ourselves after a binge, if being mean stopped binges, people wouldn't have a binging problem. The first time you yell at yourself, you would straighten yourself out and you'd never do it again. Why doesn't that happen to anyone? Not just you, again, not just because you're an asshole, but like, why doesn't that happen to anyone? Because psychologically, being mean to yourself is not going to keep you from doing anything in the future. It's just going to degrade yourself into probably doing it again. So, first step, if you binge, breathe, actively, forcibly, purposely change that mindset. Yell at that inner voice. You're not making excuses for yourself. You're just choosing a smarter way to act because negativity and meanness doesn't cut it. It doesn't do anything. It makes you have a shitty day. Number 2, remember, I said this before, your food's on the way to being poop. So don't spill out all the milk. Don't dump all the milk because you spilled a little, right? Keep it moving. Don't tell yourself, oh, I'm not going to eat dinner tonight because I had chocolate during the day. Don't do that. That's going to mess you up. And then the next day, you're going to probably eat crazy to make up for the fact that you didn't eat the night before. We want nice, even keel. It's not the end of the world if you have a day where you eat some chocolate. What becomes the end of the world is what that leaches into and how it makes us act outside of it. So food's on the way to being poop. Just remind yourself that. Hear my voice. Okay, it's its own thing. It's not a pass to screw yourself over the rest of the day. Okay. Number 3, eat protein. Continue to eat throughout the day. Like I said, drink some water, stay hydrated, just continue about what you're doing. Maybe, like I said, eat some protein so it kind of stabilizes any blood sugar spikes that might happen. And then 4, if you can, get some physical movement in. If you feel like you need to do something, you feel like, let's say you're not yelling at yourself, but you just feel like antsy, because that can happen sometimes after you're coming down from a binge, right? Especially if like you start releasing adrenaline and like all this stuff. So move a little bit, whether you can go for a walk if you can. If you can't do that, do some jumping jacks, do some lunges, some sit-ups, some wall sits, just like exert some energy somehow. What did I put here? Jumping jacks, squats, lunges, up and down the steps. If you have steps in your house or in your complex or something, go up and down a couple of them. You got a built-in Stairmaster right there. Paying taxes for it and all, or rent or whatever. So number 1, breathe and force yourself to change your mindset. Be nice, be freaking nice. Number 2, remember food is on the way to being poop. Don't let it have any bearings on the rest of your day. 3, eat protein and continue eating normally so that it doesn't mess you up the next day. And 4, if you can, get some physical activity in. It'll help burn off, I don't mean burn off like burn the fat, but truly like you will utilize the sugar, the carbs, and what you just ate if you get some physical activity in. All right, so that is our lesson. Let's look at the chat. I have some Q&A questions I want to cover. I want you guys in the chat right now. Q&A is open, so write your questions. If you want to unmute and ask your question, just put your hand up. I think you have the option, like, was it raise hand? I don't think I can do it to show you, but you should have the option on to raise your hand if you would rather just say it rather than type it. Okay, so I'm going to start with what's in the chat, in the general chat and separately, and then you guys type in the chat what your questions are. Okay, could be anything. So someone said, my hardest was always right after dinner wanting something sweet. Everyone else gets dessert, why can't I? That's gotten a lot better now though. I'm sure the holiday season will kick my butt. I'll be listening if the kiddos allow it. And I think tonight's talk will definitely go over that a bunch. I'll talk about sweets after dinner in a second. Yep, someone else said sweets after dinner. I find that once I'm home at the end of the day after being out for 12 plus hours, I want something sweet before bed. Addie said I have something sweet after every meal. I eat 0 sugar pudding. Oh, made with Fairlife, high protein milk. That's awesome. That's a great hack. I also drink Fairlife and A2 are the 2 milks that have less sugar and have higher protein. And I think they're lactose free too, like lactate type of situation. Okay, cool. So let's talk about the whole needing something sweet after you eat. Who here also experiences that? Wanting something sweet after you've eaten something savory or at the end of your day? It's like a nightcap. Put a 1 in the chat if that is you. One in the chat if you are a post-meal sweets person. Well, here's the thing. When it comes to wanting that sweet thing, it could be a few things. It could be just simply the flavor. You enjoy it. It's a palate cleanser. If you've ever seen or been to like a fancy restaurant, you know how if you have several courses, sometimes they'll give you a palate cleanser, which is usually some sorbet or something. It's like mint or some kind of fruit flavored something. And that's what cleanses the palate. It feels like it's a completion of the food that you're eating. It's the same mechanism. So if you've eaten something, it's not so much about the whole, like, it's not hormone derived, it might not be binge derived or anything like that, like we talked about, but simply it feels like it completes the meal. If you're finding it more so at the end of the night and it feels like it's a nightcap for you, it could also be something where it's not that it's just completing the meal, but it's completing your day. You know, let's say you're go, 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 go all day long, and now you're home and now you have you time. You have scrolling time, you can relax, you know, whatever. It feels like some people go for wine, some people go for plants, some people go for sweets, and it's all that same feeling of like a completion to the day. It's a routine. So my big thing is, oh, I see here what you're saying. I'm not, but my husband is, and it kills me to say no to his offer for ice cream sometimes when I do want something sweet. Yeah, the thing oh, and then see, oh yeah, okay, I'm caught up. The thing to remember with that is it's so important to have your standby sweet version of, you know, like your thing. I don't like substitute, variation. Your variation. So that can be making your own ice cream. It's easier than people think. It can be having some kind of like Greek yogurt based thing. It can be, I really like making fruit bark. For me personally, especially for people who don't like very, very sweet things, I'm very into making like berry or grape based like bark where you get the sugar-free chocolate chips and you melt it and you mix it with something and then you just let it set up on parchment. So good, so satisfying, crunchy, sweet, you know, but not crazy sweet, cold. You know, it hits on all the cylinders there. So I relate to the wine nightcap for sure. Yeah, it's not even about like the wine. It's not even about getting like shit faced, you know, like you're not drinking to get plastered on a Tuesday, but it feels like it completes the evening. And at least for me, that was a very big reason why I was a habitual wine drinker, was because it really felt like my night was not complete until I had my nice little wine glass. Like I look forward to the whole thing. It wasn't just the flavor. It was like the uncorking of the bottle, the getting my glass, the pouring it in, the holding it, the sipping on it, the relax. It's like it just signaled that it's now unwinding time. Because I wouldn't do that at 3 p.m., you know, unless it's like party or whatever. But like on a weekday by myself, I would love to end the night with it. So figure like you want to find something that you can still do those things, but just maybe swap it out for something that's more hormone friendly. And not even all the time, sometimes, let's say. Okay, so I hope this helped. If you guys have any questions, you want me to elaborate on anything, whether it's you guys or if you're watching the recording, you know me, text me, even if you're working with a coach, text me, let's brainstorm. And then keep an eye out for the November challenge that I'm going to be doing. I'll be posting about that and over the next couple days in the page. All right, so enjoy your night. Love you guys and talk to you soon.